Participating in today's webinar, sponsored by the Minnesota Gerontological Society and the University of Minnesota Center on Aging, or MAGIC. So many people have expressed interest today in our topic of empowering change through advocacy. I am Pat Schomer. I'm the moderator today for this webinar. I'm with the University of Minnesota Center on Aging and the MAGIC program, as well as being a member of the MGS board. MAGIC stands for the Minnesota Area Geriatric Education Center. These monthly webinars have become a hallmark of our two programs, and we want to continue to bring timely topics to you and to your organization. More details and information about upcoming webinars can be found on MGS's website at www.mngero.org. That's M as in Mary, N as in Nancy, Gero, G-E-R-O.org. If you go to our MGS website and then to the webinar page, you'll find links to the information that will be discussed in today's webinar. The slides will also be posted in PDF form shortly after the webinar today. A few logistics for the day. Your conference audio is muted. If you have a question for the speaker, please feel free to type the question into the chat area at the bottom of your screen. If you leave the webinar early, just close your browser and hang up your phone. If you have other questions or concerns, please feel free to email us at MGS. After the webinar today, you will be emailed an evaluation. We're interested in learning what you liked, what you didn't like, what you think we can do better, and any future topic ideas. Further information on continuing education credits will be available at the end of the webinar. There's a few groups at facilities participating. If each person wants a CEU certificate, the supervisor or person completing the survey after the webinar should list each staff person and their email in the survey question about CEU certificates. The only way we can assure that each person who wants a CEU gets one is if we have their name and email, and you type it into that question. I want to remind you that CEUs are free for MGS members and only $25 for non-members. Today's speaker, Jody Boyne, is the Vice President of Public Relations for Leading Age Minnesota. There, she is responsible for helping shape and advance the association's brand, goals, and strategic priorities. Jody came to Leading Age Minnesota with more than 25 years of experience in media relations, public affairs, and crisis communications. She has provided strategic communication counsel to the executive leadership teams in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, and has more than a decade of experience in legislative relations, including key public affairs positions with the Minnesota House of Representatives and the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. Jody holds a BA in journalism and political science from the University of St. Thomas and was a policy fellow at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. I'm very pleased to welcome our presenter today, Jody Boyne, Vice President of Public Relations for Leading Age Minnesota, and she is speaking on empowering change through advocacy. Welcome, Jody.
Thank you, Pat. Glad to be here. We have a lot to cover today, so I think we are just going to jump in and get started. And what our goals, hold on one second, there we go. What we're going to begin with is looking at what is the 5 steps of advocacy. In each of these steps we'll have tips and recommendations and best practices that you can use as you start to consider your advocacy campaigns or perhaps enhance campaigns that you currently have. So what we'll be running through today are planning, development, recruitment, engagement, and evaluation. We're going to get started with planning. When it comes to advocacy, a lot of people automatically jump to the ask. The what are we asking people to do? What are we seeking to change? And before we can get to the ask, we really need to have a solid understanding of what that ask is, what it means, and how we're going to communicate it. So when we think about advocacy, or when you look it up in the dictionary, you always hear it's the act of pleading or requesting or making an argument in favor of something. But when I look at advocacy, I look at it as more of action. It's action to support and produce a desired change. And it can take place on all levels, whether it's at city, government levels, state levels, or federal levels. It could be actions or activities that you need a board or something to do in order to advance your mission. And we shouldn't always, for the purposes of this presentation, a lot of the advocacy discussion will probably focus more on state lawmaking decisions. But as we walk through this, consider how it could be applied to your individual campaigns that you might be working on. Because again, many of the tips and recommendations that we'll be providing can be applied to those goals. The principles of advocacy, when you're starting your advocacy campaign, we really need to keep 4 principles in mind. The most successful campaigns follow this model, and that is credibility. You are the expert in an advocacy campaign. You're going to be the one-stop shop for the people who are looking for information on that campaign, who want to join that campaign, and who you are trying to influence. Credibility is really a strong component of advocacy campaigns. Accountability is the second principle of effective advocacy campaigns. The most successful campaigns are always accountable to the people they serve, the people they represent. That is the goal of the advocacy campaign, is to be accountable to those we serve to advance that mission. Collaboration, quite simply, you cannot have an advocacy campaign without collaboration. There is strength in numbers, and that really holds true with advocacy. Advocacy can bring people together, extend the resources, build support, and build momentum to actually help us achieve our goals. And the final principle of advocacy is values. Effective advocacy relies on the ability to communicate and persuade people on values. Folks that we are trying to influence need to hear that things are either good or bad. Without that moral clarity or responsibility, people won't pay attention to the details. You need to grab them from the get-go in the purpose of the advocacy campaign. Then work on educating them onto why that campaign is needed. But that overall moral value of why this request matters really needs to be a key component of your advocacy campaign. The objectives of an advocacy campaign, and I'm sure this is familiar to many of you who have worked in this area, it's to tackle root causes of issues and bring forward positive change. Advocacy works best because it can help elevate awareness to build broader support. Sometimes we work in our own bubbles, as I call them, where we're working to make a change, we're working to make a positive change, but we stall out because we just haven't built the capacity or the awareness of the issue, that the problem we're trying to solve. And advocacy can help us do that. Most importantly, bringing direct real-life experience to decision-making progress. This is a key part of advocacy campaigns, and what really has the most success of campaigns at the state capitol, for example, is when you can bring direct, real-life experience, real people to the table to talk about the problem and the solution and make the ask. And obviously the overall goal is to influence the decisions and the decision makers that directly impact your cause. That is what advocacy does. It helps either give people the support they need to make that decision, and in some instances it can change the resistance. People who are opposed to our issues, who might not necessarily be ready to vote in favor of them, through a successful advocacy campaign we are able to turn them from opponents to supporters. So when starting to develop your plan, look at it in 5 bucket areas. Obviously the plan begins with identifying the problem, but in this area we really need to be specific. With general problems, ending hunger or ending poverty is obviously something that we want to solve. But in the advocacy campaign, the ask has to be specific and it has to be tangible. It has to be something that we can actually make happen in a short amount of time in order to start addressing the overall problem. We need to set goals in the advocacy plan in order to keep tracking our work and making incremental progress to achieving the overall goal. We need to understand the issues. This bucket is, we'll go into this bucket in the next section in a little bit more detail, but this is really where you do your homework. If you're going to advocate effectively, you and everyone else involved must learn about this issue as much as possible. Data, statistics, and facts, they must be available at your fingertips and on the tip of your tongue. And to make sure that you're using and communicating these facts in really simple and understanding terms. I believe understanding the issues is probably where you will spend a bulk of your time in the initial phase of advocacy. In our objective phase, we are defining individual tactics and objectives that we want to accomplish to help us meet our overall strategy, and obviously we need to be identifying outcomes in every phase of our advocacy plan to help keep us on track. When developing the plan, a system that we've used here at Leading Age is to really go through asking the right questions internally. The first area of this is identifying the problem and the solution. What is our vision? What is our overall goal? For us, it is really providing quality care in the entire long-term continuum that allows Minnesotans to age with purpose and dignity and independence. That's our vision. That's what we strive to do every day. But that's not necessarily our advocacy request, because we need to look at what problem are we facing and how do we want to solve it. We know our vision. We need to identify what are the barriers that are preventing that from happening, and then what are the steps that we believe are needed in order to solve it. And that's when the outcomes, identifying the outcomes, start to come into play, because you need to look at what are you asking for to help you achieve your goal. Is it community action or involvement? Is it a funding request from a state and federal level? Is it a change in regulatory policy? Is it just building public will? These are the questions that if you answer and reach consensus on with your team, you've really started to complete phase one of developing the plan, which is identifying the problem, understanding your issue, and knowing your objective. The next component of the plan is looking at the influencer. And this basically hones in on who you're going to be focusing on to help you solve the problem you're trying to solve. In this plan, we recognize our allies, those people who support the issue that we are working on, those people who are part of the solution. But we also identify the resistant, who is opposed to what we are trying to accomplish. And knowing the strengths and weaknesses of each of those audiences, recognizing our allies and knowing that they will join us and will have strength in numbers is great, but we need to look at what weaknesses might result from those relationships. Does it lead to too much of like-mindedness, where we don't look at what our opponents' arguments are and focus on how we can counter their arguments? You really need to look at the opponents in a couple of different levels. One, well, you need to identify who they are, why they are opposed, and who can influence them. Sometimes opposition can be countered with facts and data, and sometimes opposition can be countered in relationships. And that's why it's important to start looking at developing a contact list. Who is going to make the decision that helps us achieve our goals? What do they support? What are they opposed to? And who do they listen to? How do they get their communication? Once you have that list put together, you start designing your strategy. And strategy should be tailored to the people you're trying to influence. So what do they care about? And developing 3 tactics that will help address their concerns. Why are they opposed? Developing counter-arguments to help turn them from an opposition to a supporter. And obviously in this phase, we're also looking at identifying outcomes. What do we want to accomplish? How many people do we need? How many votes do we have to have lined up in order for our issue to get passed? Again, one of the processes that we use is asking the right questions and identifying influencers and decision makers. As I've talked about, who can make that solution happen and what will persuade them and enable them to do this? What we have found here at Leading Age Minnesota is aligning our ask with people's values really engages them in caring about our issue. It has helped turn general supporters into champions. It has helped lessen our opposition, or at least lessen the opposition so they're not talking publicly about why they're opposed to something. And that's really important. We need to communicate to their values in order to engage them and get them to help us make our advocacy request happen. What is the benefit to them? Who are their trusted advisors, and who else in their constituency is impacted? Answering these questions will really give you the groundwork moving into your next section, which is telling the story. So you have your data, you know who you're trying to influence. Now you need to start working on what is our message? What is it we're trying to convey? Who is the best person to convey that message? In advocacy campaigns, You bring a lot of different people with a lot of different expertise to the table, but you really need to identify a spokesperson. It's usually one person, and that person has to have the ability to sell a message. They need to be persuasive. They need to be compelling. They need to understand the issues in depth so they can talk about the core specifics of the issue as well as hit the highlights. What tools do your influencers, the folks you're trying to influence, what tools do they use? Is it social media, regular media, trusted advisors, committee hearings, white papers? Looking at all of those resources will help you develop the entire plan that you need to move on to advocacy, our next phase of advocacy, which is looking at the development of the tools. And I can pause there just to see if we have any initial questions about the planning process of advocacy.
If you've got questions, please type them into the box in the middle sidebar of your screen. I don't see any questions now. Jody, if one comes up, I'll be certain to interrupt and ask.
Great, thanks, Pat. We'll move next into the development of effective advocacy. So when you start looking at the toolkit is what we call it. So you typically have people around a table as part of any advocacy effort where you're talking about what it is you're trying to accomplish. But what you really need to look at doing is starting to frame that ask. And this is where you're going to tie in all of these issues. The research that you've done on the issues, your data, your facts, your statistics, as well as your key messages. And then you start developing the supporting materials, the collateral, the leave-behinds, the website, where people can look to your resources to learn more about your issue and learn more about your specific ask, as well as developing a timeline. So in looking at this, and we touched on this briefly in the planning phase, but what you do in the planning phase is your data gathering. You're gathering all this information in order to help support your ask. In this phase, in starting to develop the tools that you'll be using, is you need to look at your data into two specific areas, supporting that emotional call to action. The goal of any advocacy campaign is to influence the outcome. And in order to do that, using your data and putting it into a story that draws people in and helps them understand the importance of the decision they're about to make, that is a key component. The other part is defeating the resistance arguments. I can't think of an advocacy campaign that doesn't have opposition. And we can work with that because in defeating opponents' arguments before they gain traction is a core part of building momentum for your ask. And defeating those arguments typically happen with data, facts, and statistics. It's not necessarily the emotion of the issue. It really is what supports why this needs to happen. Obviously, you need to develop your contact list and the decision makers, the influencers, and the storytellers, and then look for opportunities where you'll be leveraging opportunities that exist to sell your message, to promote your message. And this can be anything from events and activities to key committee deadlines, budget hearings, and decision points. Oops. Key messages, I think, are the most core part of an advocacy campaign. In my job at Leading Age Minnesota, I also do public relations and media relations. And the key messages rules in all areas are the same. It's the 4 C's: clear, concise, compelling, and call to action. These principles of key messages will really make sure that everyone is singing off the same page when it comes to advocacy. Being clear, simple language, really easy to understand to those who are unfamiliar. We've spent the past 2 weeks at the state capitol, Leading Age Minnesota, working with lawmakers to help get them on board with our long-term care agenda this session. And long-term care financing is perhaps one of the most complex issues I've ever worked on, and it is incredibly difficult to explain. And it requires a lot of math and formulas. And for newly elected lawmakers who are just coming in, they honestly don't have that much time to learn before they'll be being asked to make a decision. The key messages of your ask can help appeal to them because they're going to be simple. It's going to be something that they can repeat. It's going to be concise and short. It's almost like using 140 characters on Twitter. It's saying a message in less than 2 floors of an elevator ride. It is compelling. There is nothing worse than sitting through a presentation where someone talks in great detail on white paper level as they're talking about advocacy. Advocacy is an emotional call to action. It appeals to values. It appeals to morals. And speaking in that tone and telling that story will help your campaign really get cemented from the get-go. And always, always, the last part of key message has to be the ask. Every opportunity that you have to speak to someone has to have the ask. That's why it's really key to find the right spokesperson or the right person. If someone is not comfortable making the ask, they should not be the person selling the message. What we typically do with key messages is we recommend 3, no more than 3. This is what most people can remember and easily repeat. In addition to having the key message, it's important to have the supporting data points to support that message. So if we're talking about long-term care, for example, we want to provide quality care for all seniors in all the places they call home. It's one of our key messages. The data points that support that talk about how 60,000 seniors are turning 60,000 Minnesotans will be turning 65 every year for the next 15 to 20 years. We need to make sure that the state services, the state funding exists to help us provide that quality care. Using data about demographics to support your funding requests are the proof points that support the key message, but the key message really needs to be focused on a very high-level, compelling argument like providing quality care for seniors in all the places they call home. The other goal of key messages, as I mentioned, is advocacy must speak with one voice. There must be consensus on the messages, and everyone must agree to use those messages. It takes about 7 or 8 times of saying the same thing over and over again for people to remember it. And that's why it's really important for everyone involved in the advocacy campaign to have a clear understanding of the key messages and the proof points and be able to speak to them with one voice. Once you have your data collected and categorized by the emotional call to action and the facts and the figures, then you can start developing the materials. And I'm not going to go through these individually because I think we do these in our daily jobs most of the time. But these are some of the materials that we recommend in having in an advocacy toolkit. That is something that everyone on your team will have access to and everyone on your team will use. The key messages, a fact sheet which would provide a more detailed summary of your ask, but infographics. These are new images that are quite visual. They almost look Fisher-Price. They're very elementary in their design, but they help communicate your message in really simple terms. A standard presentation, introductory and thank you communication, testimonials from people who would benefit from the ask that we're making, obviously your key contact list, and then sample media materials as well as social media. Timelines. In the advocacy campaign, it must be dictated by a calendar. It is very easy to start a campaign, have the overall goal in mind, and know what the final deadline is, but miss out on key opportunities for you to start talking about your message and building support for them. So look to important dates. For example, if you're going to the state capitol this year to advocate on behalf of an issue, get to know the committee schedules and find out when their key hearings will be, when their policy deadlines are, when their budget deadlines are, when your topic might be a focal point. Also look for local meetings and events of lawmakers. Most lawmakers, especially from the rural areas, go home on the weekends and often have town hall meetings and forums. Get those on your advocacy calendar and be there. Those are opportunities for you or some of your supporters to have a face-to-face connection with someone. Also look for what we call push-pull opportunities. These are opportunities on the calendar where you will be proactively distributing information. They typically align with your kickoff announcement, press conferences, rallies that you might be having, events that you are hosting in order to support your agenda. But also look for opportunities where there's potential reaction. Sometimes the media doesn't always pay attention to our issues. I, for one, know that I don't see a lot of long-term care stories on a regular basis in the daily newspapers, but they do cover issues that might allow us to align our advocacy campaign, like when they talk about how Minnesotans aren't prepared for their retirement planning, folks aren't saving for retirement. How do you weave in your advocacy? where you would contact the reporter and talk about something that you're working on in order to help better prepare Minnesotans for their aging years. Those are those potential reactions. Doing media monitoring, tracking media stories, and then contacting reporters with your information will really help leverage your ability to get your story told. And obviously, in any campaign, you have to be prepared for some level of crisis communication, where there might be a negative story that could appear about your field or someone involved in your campaign. And it's just good to walk through those and have some key messages so you're able to pivot back to your issue, separating itself from an incident and focusing more on the overall goal. Getting this all on a calendar will really help keep the advocacy campaign moving forward. And looking at a recent case study, yesterday the Long-Term Care Imperative, which is a partnership between Leading Age Minnesota and care providers of Minnesota, launched a new campaign called Face Aging Minnesota. And this campaign is really designed to generate awareness of aging issues in Minnesota. With the state's changing demographics, the fastest growing area of our population is seniors. In about 15, 20 years, seniors are going to make up 1/4 of the population and outnumber the number of school kids. And frankly, the state is not prepared. We have services in place, we have a continuum of care in place, but it's not adequately being funded. And we need to continue to innovate that, because people don't want to move into institutional settings. They want to stay at home. They want to age in their communities and near their families. So we recognized a need that we needed to take our issue out of one committee or one legislative decision and start talking to it on a broader basis with Minnesotans. So we did our research. We spent an incredible amount of time, about a year, looking into why are people hesitant to talk about aging? What do they know about aging services, those home and community-based services that would allow them to stay in their homes? How is the state prepared for aging? Is it funding it adequately? Is it funding the entire continuum of care? Once we had that general information, we started to develop our campaign. Our campaign actually focuses on 2 areas. It's a little bit disruptive to start getting people's attention, and it's also going to make an emotional call to action. And we're using real seniors. This is Helen. She's 92 years old. She lives in an assisted living community. She was actually a WAC in World War II. And what we're trying to do with this campaign is make people pause. The headline is disruptive. Helen got old, the nerve of some people. We want people to stop and pause and say, what's this about? And if you look at the secondary context in the lower left-hand box, you can see where we're going. In a society that doesn't like to think about aging, consider this. Our senior population is about to double. This is really getting Minnesotans to start facing the fact that they are going to age. And we as consumers and long-term care providers and the state government and even the federal government need to collaborate more on how we're going to prepare for that age wave, how we're going to prepare to make sure that services exist so we can age with dignity and purpose and independence. It's a multidimensional campaign. It's going to be on social media, it's going to be on print advertising and radio advertising, and it's really designed to generate a conversation. So this is one example of how you can take your research and focus on your key messages and compile them into one quick ad that tells your story and always directs people for more information, and that would be at the website. Research, key messages, and materials. Those are key components of an advocacy campaign. But what I think most people have found is you sometimes feel like a solo voice. You sometimes feel that you're beating the drum and you're talking about it and no one's listening. And that's why it's really important to look about how you can amplify your voice through effective coalitions. Increasingly, the problems that we are trying to solve are really complex and they require teamwork and collaboration. Coalitions are really a powerful tool in mobilizing individuals to action, in elevating awareness of the problem, and building momentum of the solution. There's so many benefits to coalitions. You bring new levels of expertise to the table. You bring people from different perspectives and different backgrounds. They bring new ideas and new areas of expertise. It's an opportunity to look at funding. Advocacy campaigns do cost money, and sometimes we don't have enough financial resources to do it on our own. But if you can bring a few groups to the table and we're all invested in a similar goal, it helps us do something like a statewide advertising campaign. Community outreach. The more you can get into citizens, the more we can get into community advocacy with our messages, the better. And greater legitimacy. There is strength in numbers, and coalitions give you more voices. Just remember, it's very important that we're all using the same voice when we're talking about advocacy, and obviously more resources, more hands on deck, more abilities to share information, more opportunities to get into newsletters and in front of audiences that we ourselves might not be able to do alone. In building an effective coalition, coalitions take time. And oftentimes it feels like the coalition is taking more time than the actual campaign. And that's why it's important to build an effective coalition from the get-go. And that is knowing the goal. You have a common goal that you're trying to achieve. Who can help you achieve that goal? Recruiting members. Who supports the goal? Who benefits from the goal? Who can help influence the goal? Adopting really detailed objectives about what we are trying to accomplish and the steps that are needed to doing that, and identifying roles for people on the coalition. There is nothing worse than forming a coalition where you have about 20 people sitting around a table and everyone's talking and no one's really doing. And then sometimes you'll have people on the coalition who might be bringing a level of expertise that you're not necessarily tapping into. So get to know the team members of the coalition, their strengths, and identify specific roles for them. Having a communications lead, having a policy lead, having a calendar scheduling lead, those are really important components of building an effective coalition. The best practice that we have found, and we are members of a variety of coalitions, is to really have a structure in place. Organization and structure is key to maximizing the opportunity of the coalition and not delving into what some people call paralysis analysis, where we just keep talking about and revisiting the problem and not necessarily moving toward a solution, and more importantly, not moving to action. What you want to do is convene regular meetings with specific agendas. It is important to have a budget in place as well as mapping the resources. Who is bringing what to the table and who is responsible for accomplishing. Assigning those tasks to specific people and having leads who are responsible for communicating. Communicating to coalition members, not just those who are fortunate enough to serve on the team and be a part of the effort, but those who are also going to be out in the community and in their networks talking about it, as well as evaluation. We continually need to evaluate the work that we're doing in order to make sure that we are moving toward our goal. There are barriers to coalitions that I think most of us are familiar with if you've been a part of one. And in order to be successful, we have to look at how we can eliminate these barriers as part of that process. Loss of autonomy and lack of consensus. Coming into a coalition, you hold a key component of something that you want to accomplish, and you want that to continue to be a part of the agenda. So it is important to look at coalition members who have a common goal in order to make sure that their autonomy is still represented in the overall ask. Reaching consensus. You have to have consensus on the key messages, on the collateral materials, on the ask, and on the plan in order to successfully have an effective campaign, making sure that there is participation from everyone at the table, and considering removing those who aren't participating and having strong leaders. One example of an effective coalition is the 5% campaign. This was a really exciting effort that brought together waiver providers of those who serve older adult services and Minnesotans with disabilities. After years and years of funding cuts and freezes, the waiver community finally got together and said, let's unite. We're all at the Capitol making our ask for our specific program. What if we united our groups and came in as one campaign, the 5% campaign, and we're committing to life in the community for people with disabilities and older adults. This campaign started at the end of the 2013 session when waivers failed to receive funding from the Minnesota legislatures. Other services, such as nursing homes, did receive funding, but waiver programs did not. They received a small increase. And we knew we had 1 year to make a difference, a supplemental budget year, which was last year. So immediately following the legislative session, the 5% campaign formed. and it formed about 4 teams. It had a steering committee, it had a lobby committee, it had a field committee that was responsible for community engagement, it had a communications team that was responsible for the messages and the social media and the media relations. It went out and found champions in people like former State Representative Tom Huntley, Senator Kent Eakin, to start touting why this was needed. It developed about a 9-month campaign that had consistent community contacts, community engagement, lobbying meetings with lawmakers. By the time session started last February, the 5% campaign was already embedded in people's minds as a must-do agenda. And throughout session, that drumbeat continued with rallies at the Capitol, meetings with lawmakers, more supporters signing on to the bill. And the end result was the 5% campaign successfully secured its rate increase in the 2014 session. It evaluated the campaign over the summer and realized that that strength in numbers and uniting these groups who have a similar shared mission was really integral to their success, and they continue to this day. It is a great example of an effective coalition. Once you have your planning done, your research, your material, and your coalition, now it's starting to look at how you mobilize your resources. And in this section on engagement, we're going to be looking at 3 core areas: lawmakers, media, and citizens. Engagement resources are opportunities for you to engage people, particularly your influencers, in what you're trying to accomplish. It's meeting them where they're at, such as meetings and hearings and community events. It's starting petitions to show the strength that you have, to send people, to give people something to do. Sometimes in advocacy campaigns, people don't know what to do. They're not comfortable testifying. They don't want to do a media interview, but they can definitely sign a petition and promote their role in that petition. It's looking at newsletters and media and social media. These are just some examples of resources that you can use for community engagement. Engaging lawmakers is a key part of any act, or this could also be applied if you're dealing with city council members or even board of directors. It's really tailoring the message to the individual person and what their interest is. It's using your key messages right at the top, and it's really important to tell personal stories. This is an opportunity to use your constituency. When we meet with lobbyists, when we meet with lawmakers as part of our advocacy campaigns, our lobbyists do not do the talking. We bring in those caregivers, our direct line staff, our certified nursing assistants, our administrators, and our seniors to tell their personal stories, which always align with our key messages, and we have had greater success in using that element of communication than just having our lobbyists talk through a bill. Always support your facts, your case with the facts that you've developed, and listen more than you talk. Lawmakers may have a lot of questions, and they'll give you an opportunity to deliver your key messages without lecturing them. At the end, it's important to ask for their support, and always make that ask clear. You need to leave the room knowing where they stand, and you really have 3 positions as the meeting is going to know where they're at. They're either going to support, they're going to be neutral, saying they're not quite sure yet, or they're going to oppose. And advocacy doesn't end with one meeting. Advocacy continues until the decision is made, the ultimate goal is reached. So if you have supporters who are advocates, they tell you they're on board, they're signing on to your bill, they'll do a news release, they'll publicly support your campaign, thank them, and then thank them publicly. It's really important to honor and recognize those who are joining us in our advocacy efforts, and then work on converting them from supporters to champions. Folks who support our issues are great, but folks who are talking to their colleagues about it and other influencers about it, those are the people we want to keep in our camp. If a lawmaker is neutral, stay cordial with them, thank them for their time, and try and get a better understanding of what their concern is and attempt to resolve it. Sometimes they just may not be comfortable with the funding request. They may be waiting to see how things shape out. I think that's great, but really try to get an opportunity to understand their issue and convert them to be a supporter. If through this process you realize that they're more on the opposition, then what you need to do is look at how you can mobilize others on your behalf. Who do they listen to? Who influences them? And how can you get those people to deliver your message to make sure your neutrals move to supporters and your opposition move to neutral? The media is a core part of any advocacy campaign. They are the message deliverer. People rely on them. People think what's in the media is true. So getting publicity is a major element in an effective advocacy campaign. And it's really important to develop and maintain relationships with key reporters and assignment editors. They're not going to cover your issue because it's a good issue. They're going to cover it because you have presented them with messages and facts and figures and storytellers who can help develop a good story, particularly for television. And then again, you want to leverage stories from your field to talk about why your advocacy campaign is needed. When we see stories that talk about concerns over quality in long-term care communities, we immediately follow up with every reporter to talk about what we are doing to not only improve quality in that area, but how we have been receiving a lack of funding that supports quality care in the state of Minnesota. Leveraging what they're writing about with your advocacy and your advocacy ask will start to embed you into those stories. In cultivating media, it is important to be proactive. They are not going to write about you because you have a good issue. They're going to write about you because you are giving them material. So be proactive. Reach out to them weekly with new stories, new people, and new facts to start to get them to not only understand your issue, but cover your issue. And it's equally as important to be responsive. When a reporter calls you on good or bad news, call them back. This is where the relationship components come in. We have to be able to talk confidently about that, what we're asking for, but we have to be able to respond to concerns that maybe aren't in our advocacy request, but will show the reporter that we are responsive in our entire field. Using visuals. Visual communication is really important, particularly in this area of 24/7 news cycles and social media. Providing them with graphics and visuals that they can use to tell the story is really important. With media, it's important to be concise. They cover more issues in a day than the one that you might be talking to them about. Use your time wisely. Use their time wisely. Stick to your key messages. If they bite on a story idea, then give them the information that they need. If they don't have time to it, move on and come back at it another day. And just as important when talking to lawmakers, it really is being compelling, bringing the right people to the table who can tell a persuasive story, really compelling story to get the media to want to cover your issue. Citizens and advocacy are really key. I think when you look at some of the big issues at the Capitol, where it just built momentum that it could not be denied, it was because it had a social mandate. And a social mandate begins with citizens. Getting citizens, consumers, to advocate on your behalf is a core part of campaigns. And one tool we'll be talking about today is really using social media to attract them. Social media is becoming more common. It's more part of our daily lives, and it can be used to amplify your efforts by reaching more people in more places faster than ever before. And truly, it's low cost. A lot of the social media tools are free to start and free to use. There are some specialized tools that you can purchase that allows you to reach targeted communications. But if you're using Facebook and Twitter and a website, a lot of that is really driven by you developing the content and accessing those free resources. In terms of getting social with social media, it's really important to look at strategic review. How do you want to use it? How do you want to engage consumers? What are the best tools to do that? And really evaluate your time and resources. Social media is easy to use, but it takes an incredible amount of time. Some campaigns will dedicate 1 to 2 staff people solely to monitor and promote their Facebook content and their Twitter content. And a lot of us in our advocacy campaigns don't have those sort of staff resources available. So understanding what your objectives are, putting them down on the calendar, identifying the best tools, developing some key messages that you want to report is a really good place to start. And then we recommend starting small and building momentum. Select one platform. Your website is a platform of social media. It's a great place to start. You build that content, you drive people to that page, and then you can start to cross-promote it in other tools like Facebook and Twitter. So post something on Facebook and then have it come back to your website. Don't duplicate that effort and feel like you have to create 3 or 4 different series of content for each platform that you're using. Use the tools to cross-promote each other. And what's really important in a campaign is to get everyone to share it. You want this to go viral. That's why it's important to look at using visuals and videos as a part of that, and encouraging everyone to send it to their networks, both professional and personal, to friend it, to fan it, to share it. Social media builds. It starts small and builds. And if you're populating it with good contact and sending them to a place where they can get more information, that's an opportunity for people to share those resources and start to build citizen support for the objective that you're trying to do. And then quickly to wrap up, we'll be looking at evaluation. It's a core part of any project, and it's a core part of advocacy. You really need to monitor and evaluate your advocacy campaign on an annual basis, because it really helps you understand the factors and approaches that are leading to the change. It can help you improve your strategies. You'll know what worked and what didn't work. It holds you accountable to your donors, to those that you serve, as well as your internal and external stakeholders. And it helps you develop new strategies that can achieve further outcomes and build momentum. In looking at what to evaluate, look at the long-term outcomes. If your overall goal was a change in policy or a financial investment from the state in your budget, look at where you're at in achieving those goals. But don't forget about the incremental progress. Advocacy takes time, and we really need to celebrate the successes that we build along the way in terms of creating effective coalitions, changing the conversation, getting people to start talking in our key messages, getting media coverage for our stories, and bringing new people to the table who can champion our causes. And looking at how to evaluate, it's interviews and polling and media tracking, talking to your supporters, fundraising, having that honest conversation with each other around the table of how is the campaign going, what worked, what didn't work, and what could we do better. So in summary, these are just a few items that we covered today in terms of building coalitions and creating some structures, doing your research and defining your message, creating a strong network that is able to communicate on your behalf with one voice, cultivating media and citizen advocates to help further your story. Really important to celebrate those successes and secure incremental progress, and always keeping the long view in mind so you don't lose sight of your goal. And with that, Pat, I'm happy to stand for questions or have a conversation with any of our attendees.
Great. Right now we don't have any questions, but let's give them just a minute to type them in. You can type your questions into the chat box. And the first one says that as a student with little advocacy experience, do you have any suggestions for learning more about advocacy or how to observe advocates in action?
Oh, yes, definitely. If you can, and as a student, I know your time is very, very busy, but if you can, I would really suggest taking in a legislative hearing at the Capitol on an issue that might be of interest to you. The Health and Human Services Committee is always a good place to start. You can see how they operate in terms of the conversations lawmakers have amongst each other, but also see how the advocacy campaigns come in to tell their story. So watching a legislative hearing or getting involved in a campaign, looking too at students. Look at your student assembly at your college and see what they might be working on. You know, oftentimes we see student associations working on fee increases or looking at different policies on student safety. Kind of keeping an eye, how is that being covered in the college newspaper? How is that being covered in the communication that you receive? Attending those meetings, I think witnessing it firsthand really gives you a feel for what advocacy is, and then joining a cause. It's really important to join something that you believe in, and I guarantee you there are opportunities for you to get more involved.
Good. Do we have, let's see, someone is asking about the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint will be posted online shortly after the seminar, sometime this afternoon. The webinar will be posted. Will the slides be available for print? They'll be in PDF form, so I believe that you will be able to print them. Does anybody have any specific questions for Jody? Good. Well, while people maybe are taking the chance of typing, let's see, how do I begin? It says, I work in a senior HUD a HUD building and have an ever-growing deaf community with little discretionary income, internet expense is prohibitive. However, that's the only way they can communicate via video cam. How can we get them assistance?
That is a great question, and it's an issue like that I honestly don't know if people are aware of that. How to begin with that, I actually would be interested in talking who asked the question. Between Leading Age Minnesota and Care Providers Minnesota, those are the type of issues that we look at in terms of policy changes or funding changes in order to help people get the services that they need. I also know that I don't know the accurate name of it, but it's the Community of Deaf and Hard of Hearing in Minnesota is also working on some of those issues. So I encourage whoever asked that question to contact me directly, and I would be happy to maybe be able to connect them with someone who could look into this issue in more detail and then talk a little bit about how we can get them involved in the issue.
I'm sorry, Jody, can you comment a little bit about the interaction of a for-profit and a nonprofit organizations in a community collaborative situation?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I can speak from experience. Here at Leading Age Minnesota, and those who might not be familiar, we represent providers of older adult services delivery, so nursing homes, assisted living facilities, home and community-based services. And our membership is comprised of both nonprofit and for-profit members. What we have found to be the most successful is when you share a common goal, the people at the table, regardless of their ownership status, work toward the best outcomes to achieve that goal. So when you're working if you're looking at bringing for-profit and nonprofit together, that's where it's really important to have consensus on the goal and the consensus on the specific ask. In terms of working in a nonprofit association or a for-profit entity, advocacy is very similar in both those settings. The core principles of advocacy apply to both of those sectors. But if you're bringing them together, that's where the consensus comes in on getting agreement on the ask and the goal. And I think you'll find that when people share a common goal, they're ready to roll up the sleeves and work together.
Okay, we've got another question coming from Paula asking if you could address the restrictions that staff face when they are part of nonprofits. Legally, can they take a position?
Oh, I am not a lawyer, so I'm not sure on the legality of that. What we have found when we are engaging our staff or the staff who work for our members, we look at them more as messengers and telling the story. And we encourage them to get involved in advocacy by emailing their legislator and contacting their legislator and talking to their legislator. And that has gone very well with their employer and with the lawmakers. I'm not sure if there are legal restrictions in terms of being an advocate or a paid lobbyist. That's not an area I'm familiar with, but in terms of engaging your staff in advocacy, there are things that they can do that I don't think would conflict with that in terms of contacting their lawmaker, emailing them, writing a letter to the editor, telling their story, and what the decision maker can do to help make sure that they're able to do their job.
Okay, Brianna asks if there's one big takeaway for success as an advocacy group, advocacy group forms and develops. What can you suggest? What would it be, Jody?
One big takeaway for success?
Yes.
I am a firm believer in the amplify your voice. You cannot do this work alone in the world that we live in now with all of the pressing demands that they have. So for me, my two goals are always know your ask, what exactly is it you need them to do, and then bring as many people as you can to make that ask. And the core takeaway as a messenger always is make sure they're speaking with the same voice.
Good. What a wonderful question to end on, Brianna. Thank you so much for sending that in. Jody, if you would put up the last slide that talks a little bit about our MGS conference. There you've got the information.
Oh, what an exciting topic, Pat.
It very definitely is. Designing Our Destiny, Aging Ain't for Sissies, Challenge, Opportunities, and Affordability. And we've got some wonderful opportunities. First in the morning with Breakfast with David Dernberger as our morning keynote, and Nick Mezzacampa speaking after lunch. Just an excellent speaker. So I highly encourage you to join us. Registration is now open. Go to mngero.org and register to join us. Regarding the webinar today, continuing education certificates are available from the boards of social work and nursing. These are free of charge for members of MGS and $25 for non-members. To obtain this benefit, please consider joining us at MGS. We'd love to have you. The application is available at mngero.org. An annual membership is only $75, the cost of CEUs for 3 webinars. So then CEUs for the other 8 webinars we host each year are absolutely free to you, plus you have your membership. We'd love to have your involvement. Watch for your evaluation survey, which will pop up automatically in your email as soon as you probably sign out today. Filling this out is the step that we need for you to receive your CEUs. If you're in a group at a facility participating and you each want a CEU certificate, the supervisor or person completing the survey after the webinar should list each staff person and their email. The only way we can assure that each person who wants a CEU gets one is if their name and email appears in that question. Remember, CEUs are free for members, $25 for non-members. And then, just as I close, don't forget to join us for our big meeting, April 24th, our annual conference that's highlighted on your screen right now. Please consider joining us. Registration is now in progress. We greatly appreciate you joining us today, and we take your comments and your criticisms and your compliments very seriously as we plan future webinars. So if you've got topics you would like to hear, or there are things that we can do better, or things that we could quit doing, we'd love to hear your input. We welcome it. Thank you so much for joining us today.